recording this? Record on this computer. Yes. All right, we are going. And we are talking today about the essential ornaments. So, a lot of us have been playing by ourselves for the last few months, and it's hard to just practice our ensemble music, and maybe some of us have been turning to some solo music, and we see all sorts of strange symbols on our solo music and get intimidated and then say, I'm not doing this. I don't know what to do. So that's what we're going to discuss today. And I'm going to share my screen with you. So if you can't see anything, just go in the chat and let Jim know. Jim will monitor the chat for us. So we have a new person with us today. Her name is Vicki. She's from the Tidewater Chapter of the American Recorder Society. So hi, Vicki. Welcome to our disorganized mess.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry I can't get my camera to work, so it's better than not getting the audio to work, though. So anyway, I'm glad to be here.
Great, thank you. We are the Greater Fredericksburg Chapter of the American Recorder Society. I am your chapter rep, Kelly Kazak. I don't know where our technical officer is today. This is probably why we're having so many technical problems. Our conductor, James Kazak, is here. We've got our email, our website, fredericksburgrico.wixsite.com/mysite. Our Facebook group is open to everybody. Our Instagram is @FredRecorder, and we have a YouTube channel. All right. So, essential ornaments. We're going to break down the wiggles today. All those scary things that we see on music that we just don't know what to do with. So, what is ornamentation? The Harvard Dictionary of Music defines ornamentation as the modification of music, usually but not always through the addition of notes, to make it more beautiful or effective, or to demonstrate the abilities of the interpreter. It's kind of a broad definition, but I decided to go for it. There are 3 types of ornamentation that are talked about. Most of it is talked about in haut de terre and quants, and others. The first category is the essential graces, and these are the ones we're going to talk about today. That includes trills, mordents, turns, and other alterations, rhythmic alterations. The second is a class involving just a couple of notes. It's called diminutions. You take a couple of notes and you wind up breaking them down and making tons and tons and tons of more notes. And the third class is almost pure improvisation, such as what you would do it for cadenza, and we aren't going anywhere near that today, so no worries. Now, this is a really big topic, and there are lots of variations, and so I've decided we're going to be looking specifically at flute music from about 1712, when the haut de terre treatise came out, to about 1750, when the quants treatise came out. So we are not going to be looking at any of the crazy ornamentation that you might see in Bach's organ music, or the crazy ornamentation that you might see in Couperin's keyboard music. We're not going to be looking at any of that. We're going to just be looking at the flute music, and of course the recorder is the flute. Our 2 primary sources, if you want to look them up for yourself, are the haut de terre principles of the flute, recorder, and oboe, and the quants on playing the flute. All right. The essential graces are the ornamentation that's usually indicated by some sort of symbol. They're not wildly improvisatory. They can act melodically or they can act harmonically. And most of us who come from a modern instrument background, transplants through the recorder, can use our modern experience to help us demystify this topic. We don't need to be intimidated. In modern music, most woodwind players see some sort of trills or grace notes at some point, and depending on which instrument you play, you might even encounter some turns. And all of these grace notes, all of these essential graces, have their origin in earlier time periods. The major difference in using the graces today versus using the graces in the 18th century is that in Baroque music, the composers will either completely tell us when to use them, or they will give us plenty of room to decide when and where we want to use them. All right, so the first grace we're going to talk about is the trill, or it's called the shakes or the tremblement in French. Both Hodetier and Quant speak about trills, and there are two basic types of trill. The first trill is a short little burst of activity that adds sparkle to a melody, and the second type is a longer trill that happens at a cadence. The cadence is the period at the end of your musical sentence. The cadential trill in the 18th century is often combined with two other ornaments, the appoggiatura and some sort of resolution. We'll worry about that in a minute. The trill itself is a rapid wiggling of the finger from the printed note up to the next note in the scale. So not just moving a finger that's convenient, you're trying to get to the next note in the scale, know thy scales. And a large portion of Hodetier's treatise is dedicated to fingering charts for how to make the trills. So where's my
Question?
Hodetier? Yeah.
If it happens in a measure where you have an accidental,
Yep.
would you trill up to the accidental or ignore it?
In most cases, you'd go to the accidental if it happened after the accidental appeared.
Thank you.
And sometimes they'll even put the little sharp next to the trill sign or the little flat next to the trill sign to let you know you're going to that note. So there are several ways to indicate a trill, so this can be confusing if you're not sure what you're looking at. Hodetier would indicate the trill with a plus sign. So we've got that little plus sign there. For some reason it wants to highlight everything. Some composers use the little TR to indicate a trill, and others will use this little squiggle. And the little squiggle might have several ups and downs. It might just have two ups and downs. It's just a quick little squiggle. And the trill is performed thusly. So I've got my handy dandy alto here. This is an C to D trill, and we just wiggle our finger as fast as we can from the note that's printed up to the next note in the scale. If anybody wants to try their trills, now's the
I have
time.
another question.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes you see trill charts, trill finger charts.
Yes.
Is that just to make it easier, or is there another reason to have a separate chart?
The trill finger chart is to show you which note which finger you're supposed to wiggle, so that you can get to the next note in the scale.
Isn't that obvious?
Not all the time. For example, if I'm trying to trill from G to A, okay, so my G on the alto recorder is just one finger, and I'm trying to get to the A, the high A, which is half thumb. 1, 2, 3,
Oh, yeah.
4. That's not terribly obvious how you're going to wiggle. So that's where we have the trill chart to tell you the minimum number of fingers you need to wiggle to make the trill happen.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the next class of essential graces that we have is the appoggiatura, and there are several types of appoggiaturas. Yes, Bill?
Before we leave that,
Okay.
I'm looking in Opus 8, DCM Sonata.
Yeah.
And I had been wondering about the plus notes over some of the things, and so that's a trill.
That's a trill.
So, but then he has the symbol for trill in other places. Why would is they trying to tell you something different by using two different symbols?
No.
Okay.
No. They were all interchangeable, and I think it might have been left up to the printer, the editor. So all these symbols are interchangeable. Sometimes our modern editions will try to even them out and make them all the same. There is a theory running around that the plus sign is a longer trill and the squiggle sign is a shorter trill. But, you know, sometimes you wind up with the same number of wiggles, whether it's a plus sign or a wiggle sign. All right. Appoggiaturas. There are several kinds of appoggiaturas, and they have different names and slightly different functions. The first appoggiatura is called the accented appoggiatura, and this grace is indicated by a small note slurred to the big note, the principal note. The small note is played on the beat and takes half the value of the big note. And Quantz tells us in his treatise that if the note, the principal note you're playing, is divisible into 3 parts, the appoggiatura takes 2 parts and the principal note takes 1 part. This is the type of appoggiatura that precedes a trill. It's a very long appoggiatura. And the appoggiatura that comes from below the principal note is very French, and it's called the porte-voix, and it is indicated by this little upside down, or a little V, or an upside down caret. If you're playing the organ, you're going to want to use your toe, but we aren't playing the organ. Thank goodness. And it is played by going from F to G. So I've got my handy dandy recorder here. I'm going to be playing in the upper register an octave higher. This little accented porte-voix. On the beat, half the value of the big note. And in table 6, figure 25, we see a whole bunch of porte-voix. Those are all appoggiaturas, accented appoggiaturas coming from below. Yes, sir?
So why doesn't he just write it the way it sounds?
Because I think if we really want to talk about it, why doesn't he just write out that note? Ink is expensive, and he's trying to give the performer a little bit of leeway. If it's actually printed as a note, I think the performer might feel more like they have to do it instead of as an essential grace that they have the option to do it. The appoggiatura can also come from above, and actually outside of French music, I see the appoggiatura coming more from above than from below. So in this case, this is our E to D appoggiatura. You see that tiny little note? And it gets half the value of the big note. All right. Our next type of appoggiatura is called the passing appoggiatura, or the coulement. And this is also written as a small note slurred to the principal note. And Quantz notes that rather than this being played on the beat, it's played right before the beat. So it gets you this rhythm here. And I know the next question Bill's going to ask is, how do I know if it's supposed to be on the beat or off the beat? The little symbol for the coulement is the right side up caret. And this is how you know if you're playing a coulement, a passing appoggiatura, or an accented appoggiatura, and that is if principal note 1 and principal note 2 form a third. The coulement always fills in the gap of a third. So you kind of have to look at what comes before and what comes after to know what kind of appoggiatura you're looking at. So if I'm going to play figure 5 here, kind of gets you a little bit of a little dancey kind of feel to it, as opposed to the appoggiatura that we just talked about, the accented appoggiatura. That's going to give you a very different kind of sound. That sounds kind of square. Yeah, you want that little dancey feel. So are we good on the coulement, or the passing appoggiatura? We're good. All right. If anybody has questions, just type them, chime in. All right. This next essential grace is called the demi-cadence appuyée. Or I call it the super duper on the beat appoggiatura, followed by a tiny little trill. Haut de terre combines the coulement symbol and the trill symbol to indicate a trill that is preceded by a very long appoggiatura on the beat. He calls this combination symbol the demi-cadence appuyée. I see this very, very rarely outside of haut de terre's own music. So I've not found it in Quantz. I've not found it in Telemann. I've not found it in Handel or Vivaldi. And so unless you are playing haut de terre, I don't even think I've seen it in, oh my goodness, Couperin. I haven't seen it in Couperin. I don't remember ever seeing this in Couperin. Anyway, so it is played like so. Instead of just playing a B with a trill on it, I play a really long appoggiatura, that's what the C is, and then I do a quick little trill. That's it. That's all there is to it. All that symbolage for this. And you're not going to see that one very often. All right. Part of the essential graces is to get us in and out of trills. And we have a series of ornaments that basically just kind of act around trills. Like, you don't really use some of these in the middle of a piece. You can use the porte-voix in the middle of a piece, but a lot of these just happen around a cadence. The porte-voix double, or in German the Nachschlag, uses either this symbol, which is the little slashy line, or the double grace note, and that fills in the space of a third ascending, not descending, ascending. So you would play it as this. So A, B, C on the beat. In German music, you're going to see the double grace note written. I have never seen Telemann use a porte-voix double with the slashed line, so you never have to worry about seeing that. At least I don't think you do, because I've never seen it. Yes, Bill.
Do you ever see 3 or 4 notes like a glissando written that way?
Oh yeah. You can see lots of them, and we'll see some examples in a little bit.
Okay.
But I think the point of this particular ornament is you're filling in the space of a third with 2 little grace notes. All right, the double cadence. Oh boy. The double cadence is an ornament that combines a trill with half of a porte-voix or half of the turn at the very end. All right, and so you're going to see this double symbol in French music, but in German music you usually see this single symbol followed by some written out notes, or you see the appoggiatura, the trill symbol, and you see it written like so. And it sounds like this. So that was the first one, the double cadence. I got my appoggiatura, there's my B, there's my A, and I'm going to wiggle. And now I'm going to play the G and the A that's printed. Or the next example, which has the trill over the E, I'm going to start on an F because I'm starting on my appoggiatura. And then playing a few wiggles, followed by the printed 30-second notes afterwards. And that just happens to be exactly the same thing as the third example. Okay, are we good on that one? That one mostly happens around a cadence. The double cadence coupé is another combination symbol that I mostly just see in French music. I don't see this often in German music, and I definitely don't see it in Italian music. We'll be talking about the Italians later on in the year. This is a trill followed by a small little Nachschlag, except you don't end. There's no final note. There's no resolution to this hot mess. It's like, ah, quick, somebody play the B. Somebody play the B. End our misery. All right. So that one you don't see all that often. The anticipation. This ornament is the ta-da after the shake of the trill that precedes the final note of a cadence. It's often not written out, but sometimes it is. In this case, that is your that is your anticipation, that extra F right there. Oh, I'll take it up an octave. So when you hear people go, bam, ta-da, that ta is the anticipation. The da is the last note that you see. Now here are some fun ornaments. Oops, Bill, are you trying to talk? Oh, can you type it in, Bill? Can you type in your question? No, it's not that big of a deal. All right, nobody has to be an expert after the first go around, right? Our simple melodic embellishments. Yes, Bill, you got it.
Oh, I just was able to, now it's totally escaped me because I panicked about my computer. Sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. Okay. Little essential graces that often show up melodically. They don't necessarily show up around the cadence points. They show up in the middle of the phrase, and these are fun. The first one is the battement or the mordent. In the French music, the mordent is indicated with that little, like, lowercase l, or that little slash above the note. Though in German music, you're going to see the mordent is the trill wiggle with a slash through it. Okay? When you perform the battement or the mordent, you play the principal note, the note below the principal note, back to the principal note. Haha. And so that's exactly what we have going on here in our examples. Principal note, lower note, principal note. And then they wanted to show you the difference in this particular example about the difference between the trill. Trills go up, mordents go down, and they only move once. And you go as fast as you can. This is a very useful one. I think that this one gets used quite a lot, so you can add quite a bit of that into your playing. And the symbol that I see most often is the second symbol. Oops, it's not going to let me circle. It's the, I hate when it does that. It's that symbol. Whatever. Computer technical problems. All right. The next essential grace is the accent, the accent. This one, yeah, I don't see much outside of French music, but it's awfully fun. It is a little sideways slash in between repeated notes. So you'll see that all of these notes are repeated. And what you do is you do a quick little hop up to the next note in the scale and then hop back down to the principal notes. I'm going to bet my bottom dollar that that ornament has its roots in folk music. So if you see that little sideways slash, that is what that means. That is the accent. That is how they embellished several repeated notes in a row. Now this one, the turn. The turn is an ornament that embellishes the space between notes that form a melodic second. Okay, so G1, A2, there's your melodic second. And This ornament was used heavily in the 19th century, in 19th century flute music, but its origins are much earlier. Haut de terre references this ornament with the exact same symbol that you may have learned in school, and that is that cute little sideways S. And what that means is that we play the principal note, the note above, back to the principal note, the note below, back to the principal note, and then we're done. So this ornament crams a lot of notes in places. So let's see. I'm gonna just pretend I'm playing a soprano for a moment because it's easier to do the turn. So principal note, upper, principal, lower, principal, and then I'm done. So did people see these in school? People know what these are? Did you ever see these, Bill?
I did. Quick question. Sorry.
I saw the side word S, but almost none of the other ones.
Right. So this one persisted a little bit later into the 19th century. Claire, you were going to say something?
Yes. At what point would you make it an even turn versus the G elongating just a little bit as written here?
That is a really interesting question. And I think it has to do with the length of the note that you're turning on. If the principal note is divisible by 2, so if it were a quarter note or a half note, the turn would be even. If the principal note is dotted, as in this case, so a dotted quarter note or a dotted half note, then the first note is elongated. Did that help?
Yes. And also, what about the final G that's written out as a grace note in the second example, not in the actual ornament S one, not the one that's yellow right now, but where you start on the G and then you move da 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 da, that G. At what point does that elongate?
That elongates when the principal note is divisible by 3.
Okay, so you just answered that and I didn't quite get it then. My bad.
Yeah, I thought about putting up a little extra handout on that because there's actually a really good handout on turns in one of the flute method books that is still in use today, and I can send that to you later. So divisible by 2, and the turn is usually much more even. So they actually showed you the hardest turn to do here in this case, which is the dotted quarter note.
Got it. Okay, thank you for the explanation.
Sure. All right, here's our last real big ornament that, again, you aren't going to see outside of French music. You're not going to see this in Telemann. You're not going to see this in Quantz. You're not going to see this in Bach. Well, you might see the symbol for the U in Bach, but it means use your heel on the pedals. It doesn't mean anything for flutes. This is called the tour de chant. It's a little half turn right before the final trill, the cadential trill. So he's taken this little note right here and chopped it up into a little half turn or a little slow mordant. It almost looks like a slow mordant before you go into the final trill. Oops, excuse me. Oh, I forgot to play the last note. Sorry. So if you were to see that little U means chop up this note into a slow mordant. You can think about it that way.
Would you play that example again, please?
Yep. I just made up the last note. So you aren't going to see this one very much outside of haut de terre, the symbol, But you are going to see, you know, like Telemann writing it out. He'll write out a little extra term right before a cadence, and that's probably where he got it, is the tour de chant. And finally, one ornament that you might not have considered to be an ornament, and this gets confusing, but only in the music of haut de terre. This is called the flat mot, and this is a finger vibrato. And haut de terre, if you're looking at his solo music, will use the little squiggle symbol for a trill over a long note to indicate that you do finger vibrato on this long note. So it's not really trill, it's a finger vibrato. So if you were to see a wiggle sign over a very long note in haut de terre, maybe some of the other early French composers like, I don't know, Philidor, Couperin, you could interpret that not as a trill, but as a flat mot. And in fact, about a quarter of haut de terre's treatise is spent telling you not only which finger to use to trill, but which finger to use to make a flat mot. So he devotes a really large portion of his book to that meaning of that ornament. Yes, Bill?
I don't understand the difference between the two.
Between the flat mot and the trill?
Yes.
The trill, you will actually move your finger and cover the hole to make a new note, and you will go up. With the flat mot is a finger vibrato, and you always use the finger 2 holes down from the closed finger that you're playing. So if you're playing, in this case...
Wait, could I see what you're doing? Could I see your hand?
Yeah. Can you see it?
No.
No, you can't see my hand. I can stop sharing for a minute. So is my picture bigger? Okay, so if in a trill, if I'm fingering a C and I want to go to a D, I'm going to actually wiggle my ring finger. That is a trill. Okay? If I am playing a flat mot, I'm going to finger my C, and then I'm going to just lightly brush my finger against the hole 2 holes down from what I'm fingering. So here's the C, 1 hole down, 2 holes down, and I'm going to lightly do this to make a finger vibrato. It's not the same as a trill. You just hear the tone shake a little bit, maybe. So trill and flat mot. Wait, let me find my hole. Okay. Now I mention it because that symbol gets used that way in haut de terre's music. So if any of you are looking at haut de terre and you see that symbol, all right. So the when, where, and why of the simple graces. Now we need to know how to put them in our music and what to do. And the use of the essential graces varies by region and composer. And in general, we add more graces to slow movements, specifically on the repeats, than we do on fast movements. And the most important rule, if you're going to use these, is to use good taste. And what is good taste? That's up to you. All right, so haut de terre, Boismartier, Couperin, and Corrette. In general, the French composers of the first quarter of the 18th century loaded their music up with so many essential graces that you, the performer, don't have to add any more. So get out your decoding sheet. They're going to tell you what to do. I mentioned that by 1735, the haut de terre treatise was written in 1712. By 1735, in Corrette's treatise on flute playing, he's already calling haut de terre's symbols old-fashioned, and he's not using over half of them. So the further you go into the 18th century, the less intimidating this all gets. So I have an example today of a few lines of a haut de terre prelude so that we can look at it, and you can maybe try some of it out with me. Of course, you'll have to be muted. We have the porte voix. That was the appoggiatura coming from below, so that will be a D to E flat movement if you're playing along. We have a trill, That is coming from G to F. We have another trill. So it's mostly pourtoises and trills. Those are really two of the most important of the ornaments in the French music of this period. So I'm going to play and give you an example of what this sounds like. And I'm just gonna, it's a gravement, 2-2, but I'm gonna count in 4 for you. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Ended at this little cadence point right there. Did anybody want to try along, or are you good? You want to go on?
It'd be fun to try.
You want to try? You'll have to mute yourself, and we'll try one more time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. That's where we stopped, at that E flat. So it's not too bad. Take your time. Take your time. All right, Bach. Let's talk about what we do in Bach and what we see in Bach. As a modern flutist, I was told never to ornament Bach. The reason being that Bach added so many, he wrote out so many of his own ornaments that if I added my own ornaments, I would just be adding ornaments on top of ornaments. When I switched to traverso and recorder, I was told that it was perfectly acceptable to add a few simple and tasteful ornaments on the repeats in slow movements, such as Nachschlags, quick trills, but nothing too over the top. And here's an example of just how much Bach already writes out so many of these ornaments in his own music. I will be looking at the transposed version of the Bach Sonata BWV 1035, transposed for recorder, unless you really want to play it on soprano and play it in the key of E major. I'll be doing it in F, and you can just have a listen. You can already see that he's using the short appoggiaturas, that he's already filling in thirds. He's got it all. So you can see you don't really need to add an awful lot in Bach. You don't need to add an awful lot in Bach. Telemann, on the other hand, leaves quite a bit for a performer to do. And if you are at all interested in how to ornament Baroque music, I recommend getting a hold of his methodical sonatas. In his methodical sonatas, he shows how to add ornaments to his melodies. So here's his example. This is the Telemann Methodical Sonata in G minor. It is the key for traverso or voice flute. There are versions that are transposed for alto recorder, but this particular example fits pretty well in the alto recorder, so there's no worries there. You can see up top here that this is the plain melody. So if I were going to analyze what he's done a turn here, he's done a tour de chant here, he's split up a note, he's got our appoggiatura and our trill here, He's got the passing appoggiaturas here, and he's filled in a third, basically a little Nachschlag there going the wrong way. And he's basically done that for most of the example. So he went ahead and he used a lot of the French ornaments. I'm just going to play right now to give you an example. I'm going to play the unornamented version and then the ornamented version. And I just ended right there. That's very plain, very nice, right? And this is the next thing I'm going to play is what Telemann has told us we can do by adding all of our essential graces. I think I missed my E flat. That's okay. You'll all forgive me. So just using essential graces, you can get all that in if you want to. Handel also leaves a good number of opportunities for the performer to include essential graces and more complicated ornaments, which we haven't talked about, which we'll talk about later on in the year, in his music. And here's an example. You don't need to hear that. All right, well, Quantz has given us some very complex examples of how to use the essential graces in his treatise. All reports about his playing indicate that he used a great deal of restraint in the ornamentation during performance. And so here again is an example of an unembellished line and then what Quantz wants to do with it. And he uses grace notes from below and above, so he uses the two appoggiaturas together. Trill, couplets, again combines the two appoggiaturas, he fills in thirds. I mean, basically everything we just talked about, he just stuffs right in there. So if you were playing any of Quantz's music, just use some restraint. All right, the Italian composers like Vivaldi and Corelli and such, they don't care much for the essential graces used by the French. The Italians and the French fought for 100 years over whose music was superior. And we'll talk more about them in January. Okay, so we have our little example, our finger sonata today, that we were going to try to add a few essential graces to. Doesn't have to be a lot. Here's the version for soprano, and here's our version for treble. So, boy, we have both instruments going on today. Who wants to try playing a little bit and adding a few ornamentations on soprano? Anybody? No? All right, then we'll go to alto. All right, the alto version here transposed into B flat. We can add our own essential graces. So when I'm looking for adding essential graces, I start by looking for some pretty obvious places where I can add trills. I could add a trill there. That looks very trillable. I could add a trill there. I could add a trill there. Anytime there's a longer note, I can add a trill. I look for places that I can also add some double port de voix or Nachschlags. Or I can add some appoggiaturas, like here's this lovely third right here, and I can definitely add an appoggiatura there. So I could try. There, I ornamented one ornament every single measure. Anybody want to try with me? Anybody?
I would like to know how you decide how much ornament to put on.
It's all about good taste. So if I
Oh,
think there's enough, then that's enough. If I think
I'm in deep doo-doo then.
what, you don't have good taste? I think you have fine taste, Bill. When I'm trying to teach students about doing Baroque ornamentation, I usually challenge them to find one place per measure where they could do something. There's usually one place per measure you could do something. Sometimes the measure seems perfect the way it is, but there's at least one thing that you could do. So I usually give them the challenge. If you're trying to challenge yourself, you're working on your solo work and trying to challenge yourself, look for one place per measure where you could do something: an appoggiatura, a coulet, a Nachschlag, a trill, a battement. And anybody want to play?
Let's look at the second line of that, where we have the A going to the F, and what would you do in that measure?
What would I do in that measure? Oh, that's easy. I trill right there. Now, if I wanted to get fancier, I could fill in the intervals between the A and the F. Sure, I could do that. Let's see. So I could do that. I could definitely trill. I could do a couple things in that measure. You want to stump me on another measure?
How about the second line, measure 7, the repeated B's?
I was hoping someone would ask me about those. Remember, we had an essential grace that dealt with repeated notes, and that was the accent. And you could do as many of those accents as you want. That's the quick little flick up and back down. You could even do a turn in there. You could stick a couple things in there. Anybody else? All right. Remember, it's entirely up to you when and where to ornament, if at all. So let's say you're working on a piece of solo music, and here I've been promoting these books. I don't get any money for it. I just promote them because I think they're a great idea. These are the Baroque Recorder Anthology. This is the one for alto, number 3 for alto. And this is the Baroque Recorder Anthology number 2 for sopranos. It's just, if you're going to start somewhere on solo music, I think that these are great. So you can see that they have some ornaments in there. And it's entirely up to you. You're the one making the music. You're the one enjoying the music. So you do you. If you don't want to add any of these things, well, guess what? These people are dead and they aren't coming back to get you. So you're good. You're good. They never have to know. All right, we had some duets that we thought we could look at. We could try together. We've got the Bois Martier duets. This first version is for C recorder, and the second version is for F recorder. Do we have more people on F right now? I think if we have more people on F right now, then we'll do the F recorder, and if you're on C, you can play most of this on C if you take some of it down the octave. It'll work really well. All right, so I'm going to be playing the first recorder part, and I'm going to be putting in all of our ornaments. So we've got our trills, and yes, even the squiggle. When you see the squiggle, that's a trill. And we have an appoggiatura and a coulement. So that's mostly what we've got, is those appoggiaturas and those trills. And I'm going to begin on the first recorder part.
Before you start,
Yeah.
measure 16, the top half. When I play those high notes, they get very shrill. Can you play them so they're not? And I would love to hear it.
Sure. And if they're really bothering you, take them down the octave. So measure 16. I'll start in 15. Oh, and my recorder has given up the ghost for the day. I think I need to.
Sounds way better than I could.
My recorder is not happy. Let me just switch recorders. It's all clogged up. I absolutely hate breaking in new recorders. It takes me forever to break them in. They get so clogged up. We'll just switch recorders. All right, here we go. Play along if you want to. You can play along with me on the first line, or you can try the second line. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. How'd everyone do?
Made it to the end.
Made it to the end, yay! Do you want me to play the second part? Or you want me to play the second part? All right, if you're going to play the first part on your own, I'll count you off, and then we on the second part will have a measure for nothing. So, for all people doing the first part, here we go. 1, 2, 3. D, 3. How'd everyone do?
It's fun.
Good. All right. I know that we said if we had time, we might go ahead and play a little of the Bach online, but we don't have time. Zoom will kick me off at some point. So, I thank everyone for coming today. Did anyone have any questions?
My brain is full. I don't have any questions.
You don't have any questions. I know it's a lot of material to take in.
Are you going to post your notes?
Yes, I will. The notes will be posted on our website, so I'll make a blog
Okay.
about it. So
Okay.
my notes will be there. Also, if this recording goes well, I'm going to upload this recording to YouTube, and
Good idea.
he'll be all there. Next month, we're also online. We're Zoom meeting, but we're having our holiday play-alongs. So all those holiday play-alongs are currently in production. Everybody's favorite holiday music. We'll try playing along and see how the technology treats us. And I hope y'all will be there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Vicki, pleasure having you, making your
Oh,
acquaintance.
thank you. Maybe next